Today's Manager Monday is called Best Practices for Requesting a Social Security Number. I am just so excited for the person that we have today. Today we have our very own Mignon Lawson. She is joining us. She's the Director of Adult Education in Abilene ISD. She's been with Abilene ISD since 1995. Prior to working in adult education, Ms. Lawson served as a teacher and later as an assistant principal. In 2009, Ms. Lawson was recognized as an Assistant Middle School Principal of the Year for Region 14. So lots of kudos there. In 2009, she was also involved in Teen Serving Texas Committee, where she ended her tenure as chair in 2012. Today, Ms. Lawson is a Workforce Solutions of West Central Texas board member, and she also belongs to the AEL State Advisory Committee, where she serves as a member. Not surprisingly, Ms. Lawson also currently serves for the Texas Association for Literacy and Adult Education, otherwise known as TALY, and was recently voted as vice president. She holds her master's in education from Abilene Christian University and her bachelor's in science from Hardin-Simmons University. When Ms. Lawson finds time outside of work, I really don't know when that is, she shares that she's a huge Astros fan, enjoys the outdoors, and swims daily when the weather is warm. As you can see, we only invite the very best for our Manager Monday listeners. So welcome, Ms. Mignon Lawson.
Well, let me say welcome to everyone, and I hope over these next few minutes as we discuss the Social Security issues and the ID issues that we can come up with some things that will help. I do realize that Texas is a big place, and so we have all different needs around the state based on the size of our programs. But then some things are mandatory that we all have to have, so that's what we're going to kind of be focusing on here in these next few minutes. The first thing that we're going to focus on here is what are our objectives today. First of all, we're going to talk about what's required. What do we all have to have, regardless of the size of our program? And then how do we do it? And I'm going to tell you right up front, in Abilene, I operate on the KISS theory. Keep it simple, sweetie. Just keep it as simple as possible. Get what we need, but don't make it any more difficult than we have to for your staff and your personnel as you have to work through this. And then why do we need to collect some of this information? Because I think you may be surprised to see some of the things that maybe you haven't even thought of the consequences of having it or not having all of this information. And then I'll share with you how we do it. And then hopefully you can take some of those things and, tweak it to fit what will work for your program. Here's the two things we're going to focus on the most, because these are the two things that have come out recently in the letter that kind of set off kind of a wave here in the state, the Social Security numbers, and then acceptable forms of ID. Now, as we go through this, you're going to realize, too, there are some things that we have to do, and then some things that are just maybe recommended. On the Social Security information, it is, and this is in letter 0219 that came out on September 1st. You must, AL providers, we're not required to collect that Social Security number, to copy it or to verify it. But then here's the thing that I think kind of sounds like, oh, we're talking out of both sides of our mouth, because it says, but you must implement a protocol to ensure that your Social Security number's information is correct. So how are you going to do that? I will tell you, because I don't know about you, but sometimes our students, even though they may write the Social Security number on the enrollment form, handwriting can be an issue when your data entry people get that form, and they're trying to figure out, was that a 6, was it a 0, was it an 8? Sometimes we've had students transpose numbers or just give you the wrong number totally, because maybe, they don't really they don't know their own Social Security number. So those are the things that you have to deal with. I will tell you that our program, we do copy the Social Security number. Yes, it falls under that personal identifiable information, but we handle it the same way you already handle all the other information that you have from students. That gives us a way to verify that, that the information is correct. So as I just said, we do copy the Social Security number, and then we protect that information by being in locked files, in locked offices, in a locked building. Because here's something, and this was a discussion I had with our current data entry staff. They have to put their name now in there that they verified that information. So that when they type their name in, they want it to be accurate because they're putting their credibility on the line. And even if a student decides not to disclose their Social Security number, their name still has to be entered into TEAMS now. But we're going to look here. I'm going to show you some things of this acceptable forms of identification. And I'm not going to read you this. There's 2 slides here back to back. This is half of what's acceptable forms of identification. And as you see here, and I'm going to go ahead and go to the second page because you'll notice at the very top there it says school records. Now, here's one of the things that I will point out. You can put a student in TEAMS without a Social Security number. You cannot now enter a participant without an acceptable form of ID. So while you can get them in with the ID, you cannot get them in without an ID. So one of these forms of things that you see here on these 2 slides, you have to be collecting as a program. Now, I know that in the letter that recently came out, some of the documentation from Anson Green, that it says there's going to be some extenuating circumstances. I went back and looked at that letter. Right now, that has not been in our documentation we have to this point, that has not been expanded on what that could be, because if you've got 2 slides here worth of forms of ID that someone could have, I don't know what the exemption form may look like. At this time, it is not even in the drop-down bar in TEAMS. So at this time, you have to have one of these just to enter that participant in there. Also, as of November 1st, you have to have one of those documented even to put in contact hours. So even if your student was already in, now without one of these there in their profile, you won't be able to get them into the their hours in either, which is reason some of the things have been coming out recently about some extending some deadlines and some things like that. I will point out to you one of the things, though. Even if you get a student in TEAMS with, say, just the ID, you want to encourage your students, especially if they're your GED students, to get that photo ID, because they are not going to be able to go to a testing center and test without a photo ID. So that's something you really want to focus on and be sure. Here's one of the things that we have also found with these IDs, and this is talking more about the young ones. When I say the young ones, I'm referring to 16, 17, 18-year-olds, because those are the ones we have to have additional paperwork on, as we all know, to be in compliance. If you'll notice here, and the reason I've left it on this slide here, is this forms of ID. The very thing there at the top is a school record. So when you get a school withdrawal from one of your 16, 17, 18-year-olds, that school withdrawal is a school record here. So it can be your ID, and it keeps you in compliance for those young ones. So you can use one piece of paper and kind of check off 2 boxes for your program. You have your paperwork for the underage, 16, 17, 18-year-olds, and you have an ID here because you get a school record when you get that withdrawal form. So that kind of can help you with that as well. So now I'm going to ask some of you, what are you doing to collect this stuff? So I'm going to see if someone will give me some ideas. How are y'all collecting Social Security numbers or the acceptable forms of ID?
So Mary Frances responded that when they call for information, I talk to them right then about what IDs they bring to registration. Thank you, Mary Frances. Gamaliel also says Denton ISD does the same.
Yes, that's good. Because I will say this, as we all know, the sooner we can collect this information, the better. See, so everyone's doing kind of the same thing as far as how we're collecting it.
Nadine added that they also ask for Social Securities and driver's licenses, which I do want to let everyone know that this is a safe space also. If you are not currently asking for Social Security numbers, or maybe this is a brand new thing because now we're required to ask, but if you just started, what are some of those challenges to provide some solutions? So
I'll show you in this next slide, and we're going to be discussing and talking as you keep thinking of ways and stuff that how you're collecting this. Yes, ESL students, I will absolutely agree, are the biggest challenge because they tend to not have their documentation, or, as we all know, they may some of the documentation they have, they don't remember their passwords. And so, Abilene is a drop-off point for the International Rescue Committee, which means we have a lot of refugee students who have been brought in from other countries, and they truly do not have that information, a lot of it. And so, yes, an ESL student with just the language barriers and things are a bigger challenge, I think, for all of us. This is just what I call the nuts and bolts out of a letter. If you call into our program and you're wanting to check into classes, after the secretary she tells you all of this information verbally, but then we mail out a letter to them. And, of course, we change the orientation dates and stuff, but this is when you need to be here, and you'll notice in big, bold, the driver's license, state ID, and we list those. Now, if someone tells her on the phone they don't have those, then she'll start going down that long list of all the other things that are acceptable. Usually those are the two that are most common. It's the reason we just list those. And then the Social Security card. And we tell them, in the letter, the rest of the letter, we tell them the times and stuff that they have to be here. But you also see how we focus on those 16, 17, and 18-year-olds. We try to get them in even before the official day of orientation so that you can be sure and get all that additional paperwork and documentation that we all need for that group. And I'll be happy if someone wants to share the entire letter. I don't mind doing that. This was just the main parts of that letter of what we have to do and stuff to try to stay in compliance. Here, this next slide, I will show you. This is what a day one of orientation looks like. After we've already talked to the student on the phone, we've mailed out that letter. So that student has been told 2 different times in 2 different ways what they need to bring. On day one, there'll be staff at the front door greeting the students as they come in. We have assigned staff that will be copying their IDs and their Social Security cards, so that they can they could take my ID, my card, copy it, and hand it right back, the originals right back to the student. We also then make double sure if someone walks in and they're under 19 that we have all of the paperwork that we need, direct them down the hall to the room. And now, what if somebody always forgets, I didn't bring my Social Security card. I will bring it tomorrow. We will work with that, but we have a form that we have created, and just a very simple thing. But this is more for our end. This is so those students don't fall through the cracks, and you don't lose sight of, who are we going to get something from tomorrow. So the student comes in, one of those ladies that is checking in, those 3 there that have verified it, and they just write the student's name, what they told them, which one they're going to bring, and that way we know exactly who to follow up with tomorrow on day 2 of orientation. That's just a simple thing that I created in an Excel spreadsheet. You could tweak it however you want to, but it helps you because we all get busy and you forget until it comes back and you can't get the information in Teams. So that's just something that I hope that it'll help everyone, is how we kind of try to keep up with those that forget, because unfortunately we all know there will be some that do forget, even though they've been told on the phone and we've mailed out the letter to them. So
we do have a question.
Okay.
One of the questions that we have is, what do you do with this form after it's been completed? Is it filed? Is it thrown away?
No, we just shred it. As soon as, if they, like Jane there, that was used of Jane Doe. Let me go back to that form. As soon as we get that information from Jane, we shred it, because this form is really just a reminder for us. to be sure and follow up again with that student on day 2. So until we get that information from the student, we will keep, we will have a folder with that so that those are the ones we know, check on them because we didn't get it. Because in that moment of getting everybody in the door, that first day of orientation, the students, they don't know the procedures. You cannot keep up with which students told you they'll bring it tomorrow unless you somehow write it down. And so that's the reason we do that. But as soon as we get it, we just get away with this form. That form is strictly for an in-house, way of doing it.
So we do have a couple of comments, lots of folks saying how great the form is and they think it's a great idea. Nadine says it's more formal than the Post-it we use, LOL, so that's it's so true. Yeah. But it does formalize the process. Another question that we have is when there is something missing in the form that you have on your screen, it says verified by Linda, Dana, and Hillary. Are these the same people that go and search for the student when there is some missing document? Are they the ones, or who follows up when something's missing?
Now, usually I will give those forms. We will either give them to the lady who's leading orientation so that on day 2, they're in the room with her and she can follow up with it. But, let's say if it's a large group, then yes, one of those ladies can go down there and help and make sure we get, follow up, because you don't want to slow down the whole process for maybe 3 or 4 that forgot something. We try to, as they're coming in the morning, if you can remember their faces too, to catch them as they come in on day 2. But I can tell you that that's usually difficult to do because you don't usually know the student. Unless it happens to be a returning student, these are not people you usually know right at that time because it's so new in the process. So, but we will let the orientation, and she will just say these names and say, hey, if you were probably going to bring something today, not calling them out on what they were going to bring. If you did, we need you to go turn that in, and then we'll just keep following up till we get it. Even it sometimes is easier to get it once they get into a classroom situation. But you have to decide as a program, are you going to ever let them into your classroom without an acceptable form of ID? And how far would you let it go? Because if you never get that, if you don't get something there, that person is not going to be able to become a participant in your program right now. So that's a program decision you've got to decide. Will you let them go till day 2 or 3? If your orientation's taking 3 days, are you going to let them say you have to have it by the 3rd day, or we won't let you continue? Or, and I'll tell you, we had this debate in-house. What day do you want to say that? Because if you say on day 1, if they don't have their ID, we're not going to let you even go down to orientation. Well, then at some point you're hurting yourself, the program, and the student, because somebody's going to forget that on day 1. But if you tell them that and they have to leave, then are you going to put them in the next time you're having orientation? And so, again, you're losing contact hours and all those things. So we decided we would use our day 2 as the time, and we tell them, we have to have this. Now, so far, we have not run into a situation where someone didn't have an ID, to where we had to go to those extenuating circumstances, to where that's going to have to be, based on the letters, guidance, documented. But we have not, as a program providers, we haven't received information yet from TWC in Austin as to what's that extenuating circumstance. Is that my house burnt down and I lost everything? I mean, what's that going to be? I'm just throwing that out there as an idea. I don't know, because until we get that guidance, I don't know. So at this point, we're operating under the guidance we have. No ID. That means you can't be in our program, and so then you as a program just have to decide how far you want to, so to speak, kick that can down the road before you say, okay, no more. So that's kind of a challenge right now.
You have highlighted that the important thing is it's not black and white. There's lots of room for gray, and it's up to the program to determine at what point do you say, okay, it's only up to this point, less than 12 hours, or only up to orientation day 2 in your case. So I think that's valuable insight that you have shared with us to consider how we want to utilize this information moving forward. So thank you for that. That's very, very helpful.
Well, it's a challenge for everyone because it's not black and white too sometimes though. So that's just the way I'm sharing how we've kind of had these discussions in house already. So here's one of the things that this was sent out in that letter 219 that we were told we must modify our enrollment forms to include that Social Security number was requested, because as we're going to look here at some of the things that that we must have it for. The name of the staff person also that requested that information and the date. So what I'll show you now is this, and this is a small corner on the back page of our enrollment form. We have in a little note section. This section's about a 2-inch square by 2-inch square. The Social Security number was verified by, and then the date, and the driver's license. And you can put on there they elected not to disclose on the Social Security number, but this is to, and we're going to look at this other guidance here in just a moment, but this is to help with getting the Social Security numbers that are so vital, as we're going to see here in just a few minutes, on everything that our programs are kind of graded on and the data of how we're performing. So you have to document this. Now, here's the thing, and the reason I'll go back to why we opted to copy the Social Security card. The person down in your orientation room, they verify that Social Security number, and the student writes it on their enrollment form. Then that form comes to your data entry people to be officially loaded into Teams. If they can't read the handwriting, they didn't see it, they don't have anything to go back to. So that's the reason we went ahead and decided to copying it was the only sure way of being able to verify that that we were entering that information correctly. Here's some of the reasons of why we need to collect Social Security numbers, and this is true for all of us. The employment data, the earnings data, your Texas high school completers, and then one of the big ones was the TANF funding documentation and some of the things that are changing with that. Also, and if you're in the leadership positions, you get these monthly reports. Here are the 9 areas your program is evaluated on right now. And if you look at this, especially you look at the last 3, number 7, 8, and 9, your credentials achievements. With those Social Security numbers, those can be matched up very quickly, and your program can get credit. Of course, employment, which we don't really have any control over, but TWC is pulling that information from all of their databases. Teams is one, but they have TWIST. They have numerous databases. Well, those employment records are pulled with Social Security numbers. So you can see that your program, if you're not getting those Social Security numbers in there, it's going to be difficult for you to get the information, to get the credit and stuff that your program deserves and stuff, because you don't have that information. This next 3 slides, and these are all, one letter, so to speak. But here's our Quality Improvement Awards. Okay? Now, this is, like I said, because there's so much information here, but as you look what they're measured on, and it's an improvement award where you see on the last slide, I'm going to show you how much money your program could win. Okay, the MSGs, we're all familiar with that, credentials, and then we're down into the enrollments of the different programs. So you've got, there's what the data that's being pulled. And here you can see how it's calculated by your high school completers, the exiters. Again, all of those things, that we need to get credit. But look here at this slide. This is quite telling. Those awards, and they give these out at the Texas Workforce Annual Conference. There can be up to 6 winners of $40,000 each, and this information comes from that Workforce Development Letter right there listed 319. Well, if you're not getting all those Social Security numbers in there, you may be missing out on your program getting the credit it deserves. And you could be missing out on winning some significant money there that might not have targets added to it, but money that you could be spending on your program to enhance, what you're already doing. So here's my question as y'all are all listening. Is your program getting all the credit it deserves? Do you feel like that you're capturing this information in a way that you, as a program, are getting credit for all the hard work? Now, obviously, it helps the student, too, and we're going to talk about how this can have an impact on the students as well. But does everybody feel like that that's something, the value of that Social Security number being entered, that will help you get what you deserve as a program?
And one thing to consider, Mignon, is maybe how is your program getting all the credit it deserves if they're not documenting the Social Security numbers, for example? How do you feel that you're doing that? How is your program addressing that? We do have a comment from Nadine. She says that data entry has caught errors of Social Security numbers and date of birth from data sheet to actual copies of Social Security numbers and driver's licenses despite orientation facilitators checking. In other words, the student reports, or the participant or the individual states, this is my date of birth or this is my Social Security number, and then there's a facilitator who's verifying, their driver's licenses and Social Security numbers, but then they make copies and they realize, wow, even though we had someone verifying the cards, they still found inconsistencies, which holds water to what you're saying, the value of making copies. I mean, it does put an extra measure for securing PII. However, in the end, it goes back to what you're saying here, that your program gets the credit that it deserves, because how else would you do that? You would have to do it individually by calling the students after they've exited to see if they're working, to see if they entered post-secondary. What are some other ways that if they didn't collect Social Security, how would programs attain their credit, Mignon?
Yeah, well, and here's one of the things, and this is in Teams, and this is a report that if you have administrative access, and this is just the drop-down side of the left-hand side of what's in Teams. And if you look, there's that admin, and then once you go on, if you click on the admin, you get a drop-down of the Texas Certificate of High School potential matches. Okay, the word potential there is the big word, because what this means is you have students that they show up on this report, you are currently not getting credit for them. Now, why could that happen? Well, I've had students in there that they gave us one Social Security number. Then when they registered for their GED.com account so that they could start taking the official GED test, they transposed a number. It will kick them out on this. If they entered into your program maybe 2 years ago and you didn't have a Social Security number at that time, and now they are taking the test, they've done their GED.com account, they put their Social Security number in there, it will put them out on this. So how do you get them off this report so that you can get credit? Because once they show up on this report, they have started taking a test, and the test score will not show up under their assessment. So that if you're looking at that to say, hey, how did Mignon do on the math test, it's not going to show you because I got put off on this list. So here's one of the things. When you click on that potential matches, here's the information that you're going to see. It'll have the source, and it'll say Teams. The word Teams will be it'll be an active link. You can click on that, and if you're a large program, it will bring that student's information up, and it'll tell you what class they're in, so you know exactly where they're going. But then you have their participant ID, Social Security number, last name, date of birth, and then who's providing the services. But then at the bottom, right under that, is a little box, and it says verified with original test. This is how you can get that person off of this list so that they will go back and start collecting the data and you get credit. Now, when you verify that, that means what I do is I notify the teacher. They let the students know, hey, we need to log into your GED.com account, and the student prints a copy of the scores of whatever they've accumulated up to that point. It does not matter if they passed or not. That doesn't. If they're on this test, on this report, they may have passed the test. They may not have, but it'll still put them on here. If something in the database between their GED.com account and teams is not matching. It could be even, and we've heard this numerous times, if their last name is De La Garza, is there a space? Is there not a space? Those type things can put them out on this match. So you want to get them off of there. So once that student prints that scores off of their GED.com account, I can now go back in, test, and just check that box there, verified with the original test, and it will show that that's a match, and they will start then you'll start getting the credit for that student. But here's one thing I want to remind you of and warn you of. When they do that, and I use that score that they printed for me to get them off of that potential match report, keep that test score, that printout that the student gives you. You can put it in their file. You can do a separate file, whatever works for your program, because that verification is subject to being audited. So you want to be sure and do that. Here's the other thing, and this is one of those things on that GED.com account, that it says that the Social Security number is optional. Okay, that right there, typical students, and because everybody's worried about identity theft and stuff, unless you're encouraging your students to do that, they may say, hey, it's optional, I'm going to leave it off, which is kind of the human nature thing to do there. You want to encourage them, and we tell all of ours, to put your Social Security number on there. And here's, some of the reasons why is because, especially with women, they'll come back 5, 10 years from now, want to print off a copy of their certificate. And now we see this frequently. I don't remember what last name. I don't remember, was it before I married, after I married, before I divorced, after I divorced? And you get into all of those things. It becomes much harder to get a match if that Social Security number is not in there, especially with those type things going on. So the other thing, our program, we have some outside entities here that provide scholarships for some of our students who may not have the money when they're ready to take their test. We tell our students, if you accept that this entity is going to pay for your test, that it's required they put their Social Security number in, because when we can let those people know, just by spreadsheet, yes, you passed or you didn't pass, and they sign forms for all of this to be okay. So that it's a way of accountability. You took their willingness to help you pay for the test. So the least you can do is we can report back to them how you're doing as far as passing or not passing. They don't get an actual score. They just want to know. And it's a way, and a student doesn't have to take that scholarship if they don't want to do that. Obviously, that's just something that's there to help our students when they don't have the financial resources that are available.
We have some questions. So one of the questions that we have is a great question. It's from Jeanette. She says, once a copy of a Social Security number is made, do you file it or shred it after you put it in Teams?
At this time right now, as long as the student is active here, we leave it with the rest of their file. Of course, our school district has the shred. We have a formal shredding policies, and as soon as we will shred it as soon as that file is no longer needed, based upon the team's data of TWC's documentation of, I believe it's 3 years after the grant cycle is over. So you've really got to keep it a long time, but we keep it just in case there's ever any questions or anything. But yes, I think you could realistically, once you've got it in Teams, and as long as you don't see that student's not on any of these potential matches, then I think that could be a program call where it would be fine to go ahead and shred it if that's what someone was concerned about the PII.
Mm-hmm. Another question that we have is, do you have someone specifically who checks that when a student registers for GED.com, whether they get the scholarship or not, that they have entered the Social Security number? Yeah.
Yes, we make our students aware during orientation because I have 2 different groups. I have one that's called the Highland Education Initiative, which is, I'll tell you, it's the Highland Church of Christ here in Abilene, and they're very generous. They give us $1,000 a month to pay for scholarships. Now, we don't have to use it. Yeah, and so they are willing to do that. And then I have our Literacy Council that buys vouchers for us. And so we do that. And on that one, on that group, they want to know just kind of like, okay, we gave you 40 vouchers. Did 30 of them pass that used those vouchers? So that's the way we do track it that way for them, though. But all of our students are made aware that once you're ready to take the GED test, and when I say ready, that doesn't, because a lot of students will come in and think they're ready. That means that they pass that official GED practice test. So that gives us a way of tracking with that on those students.
We do have a comment from Nadine. She says, we only keep a copy attached to the data sheet, meaning the Social Security, I'm assuming, and locked away. It's never put in student master folders.
Yeah, all of our data, all of our student information is locked up in one office. So our files are not, with the teachers, they use their Teams access to look at scores and to track hours and those type things. And if they ever have a question, we always tell them, hey, we will help you dissect. We go over all those reports with them during our fall workshop so that teachers know how to look at that without having the PII in their room or, in a filing cabinet. So ours is always locked up in one place.
We have another comment. This is from Tiffany Lee. She says, our program staples a copy to the enrollment form, and the point of contact for that class keeps it in their file cabinet. Then at the end of the year, we put it in their student folder.
Yeah. And see, that's the reason I think it's based on your program size, what you can and cannot manage. Because I think we're kind of middle of the road on the size as far as the where we fall in the grand scheme of things for the state. Some of the things that we're able to do because we can be a little more hands-on would be difficult if you were at, say, HVAC or something like that, just by sheer volume. Although I think, even those programs, if you, designate the people and the responsibilities and you get your process set up, that you can, make it work on however you want to. We are small enough that we're able to have a little more hands-on. Although I will say, we have 19 counties that cover 18,000 square miles. So number-wise small, area-wise quite large, and so we have processes that we have to do different for our outer sites because they may be an hour and a half away as opposed to right here in our main building. So I think that's where programs have to adapt on what can work best for them. This text chase, back to the high school, your GEDs matching. Here's how TWC's records, they match them against the TEA. And these are the things that they use. If you're using just the name or the date of birth, you can see how that would be virtually, it'd be very difficult. Because the Social Security number there is the thing that can quickly and easily be tracked. Because participant names, you could take some of the common names, Maria Gonzalez and Joe Smith and those type things. And tracking it by name around the state is going to be difficult to do because of the that kind of data. Again, you'll notice that numerous times how this letter 2.19 keeps coming up. I would say that that's a letter that if you haven't read, and really dissected, obviously you can see the importance of that letter because it's numerous things that we're talking about today are in that letter. When you're reading those letters, and I will tell you, I have all of these letters in a 3-ring binder, and as a new one comes out, it just goes on top. I tab them, and I may, on some, I'll have this one's about the PII, and I'll just put a tab out there. Or this is about the IDs, and I tab it. And I have them highlighted, underlined. I look for words like must, required, suggested. And those are the words, you want to underline and really focus on because that is where you get your guidance, and you can read it. And the reason I know they're on the, we can always look them up on the Internet, but by having them in that notebook, it gives me very quick reference. It also gives me a way of, I've already got it highlighted and underlined. I'll write keywords in the margins of those letters so that I can refer to them very quickly. So that's something that I do. It just helps me. It works for me to try to make sure that we're not missing some keyword. Myself and our lady who is, we all had to turn in your team's contact. She and I read them, and she keeps a notebook too. I share them with my staff, my teachers, the ones that, that something may apply to what their job title does. But truthfully, you need 2 or 3 key people that are reading them and trying to keep everything in compliance so that you have that checks and balances to try to help watch for those different things. This next one, this here is just one of those things that another reason you really have to have Social Security numbers. The TANF documentation. Because if you remember, you notice again, it's that letter 219. This is where TWC this year took over the TANF documentation for the state and for the programs. I am one of those people that thrilled me, and I'll show you why on our next slide in just a minute. But your program must have at least 75% of your participants with Social Security numbers in order for us all to get to keep, that benefit of having them do that instead of us trying to get the TANF documentation. And you can see why it would be so difficult, because TWC has access to databases where with the Social Security number, they can match this up very quickly. And I don't know about your program, but ours, when the TANF documentation, when we were having to try to collect it, it is difficult because, again, and the ones we had the most difficulty getting was the ESL student, mainly because of the language barrier. They didn't know they would not know their password, even though they might have. People would say, well, they've got SNAP or they've got CHIPS. It's all on the internet. They can log into their page and get the information. Rarely did we find one that knew their password, that's where they could get that for us. And keep in mind, 75% is a minimum. That's the minimum that we have to do as a state to do that. Because when you read that letter, it says, and this is one of those very things I'm going to tell you, read to you what the letter said. It says, providers who fail to do so, who fail to keep your program with at least 75% with your participants with Social Security numbers. So it says, providers who fail to do so will be expected to collect and maintain individual TANF eligibility documentation. Okay, that is not someplace I want this program to go, and I'm sure you don't either, because it's another thing that we're responsible for, keeping up with, getting the participant to bring. When we're already having to try to get Social Security numbers, we're already trying to get ID documentation. And now, if we had to go back to this, we would be responsible for collecting this. Our program last year, I think we were at about 87 or 88% of our participants had Social Security numbers, and I expect it to even go up more this year. And I will tell you, out of that group that didn't have them, all of them but 3 were ESL students. So that's the reason I say it's difficult to get there. And I'm going to show you, this is just kind of a self-confession, this next slide. When they changed this rule in 2018-19, where TWC took away, where free and reduced lunch was no longer allowed as TANF documentation. That was just when that one change went into. It decreased our documentation from 165 students that we were able to get TANF documentation for down to 49 in 1 year, just by losing the free and reduced lunches. So you can see what a change just one thing does. Now, the reason that one had the great effect on us was because I am under an ISD, and as an administrator for Abilene ISD, a parent could come in, or a participant that was going to do classes here, and they could tell us, I have students in, one of our elementary schools or our middle schools or high schools. It did not matter. And I could print off that information, and we could use it as documentation. And our district was not one that gave the blanket free and reduced lunch, because if you were, this didn't help you even back then. So just one little change, you can see how much it affected our data. So I can just guarantee you that we're going to be above that 75% on Social Security numbers, because if we go back to this, then you have to document spending your TANF money in a different way, and it becomes much more difficult to keep up with all this. So here's some these things. We've talked about all of this, so it's kind of like, okay, what are y'all doing? Here's your ideal situation. That perfect student that shows up for your orientation that wants to take place, wants to be a part here. That student, they've called in, you've given them the information. In our case, we mailed them the letter with just documenting again. It's just in writing what we've already told them verbally. You've already told them what all they need to bring. That student shows up that morning. They're ready to go. They have their ID. They have their Social Security cards. They arrive. They have everything they need. That's your perfect student. That's the ones you just dream about that they come in. It makes your life easier. It makes the data entry life easier. It makes everything just flow much easier for that. But, we all know that happens occasionally, but not always. So here's your next best thing. They show up on that first day. They have an ID. They forgot their Social Security card. They couldn't find it, all those things. And that's where we use that form that I shared, where we document, okay, Jane's going to bring hers tomorrow, and we document who talked to Jane. That's just for our in-house. It doesn't have anything official, but it's for us in-house. And then we copy, that Social Security card whenever we can get it, that second day, third day. Because remember, you can enter a student in Teams without Social Security card, without that Social Security number. You're going to lose a lot of your data as far as getting credit for it. And it's going to be difficult for them when they get ready, if it's a GED student, when they're ready to go take their official test, because finding and matching up their information. But you can do it. Then, okay, here's the student that a lot of times we all see. They don't find, they don't ever have, they've never gotten a Social Security card, they don't know what to do. So, you can enter them with that acceptable form of ID, but you strongly advise them, on their GED.com account, they need to get a Social Security card, or they need to find theirs so that they can enter that. And, so that, again, someday, 5 or 10 years from now, when they want to come back and get a copy of their certificate, it'll be much easier for them to be able to do that, and to help them. And there are different entities in your communities that'll probably help with students doing that. That Highland Church of Christ group that I mentioned, they have been willing to even help pay for the IDs, because I think it's about $16 here. I don't know if that's a statewide cost, but here in Abilene. So they're willing to do that. I will warn you that if a student has never had an ID, let's say it's a Social Security card, one of your 16 or 17-year-olds, then the first time they go to apply and fill out all the information that you have to do to get that, a parent or guardian will have to be with them. We've learned that just through trying to help some of our younger students with that. Now, I've shared a lot of different ideas here, and I will show you here. Here is where some of this information, I've collected it from, the letters and things. Of course, willing to show you that. Any of those forms that I've shared, or if you want to complete that form that we used, or any of those complete copy of our letter that we mail to students, I'll be more than happy to help you with that. I hope this has been helpful. I've shared some of the things that we do. Like I said, and of course, the things that are required that we all have to do.
Lots of great information that has been shared today. It has been a pleasure learning from you. Thank you so much for sharing and taking time from your day to provide us with this wealth of information. Lots of great stuff. Well, thank you, everybody. This does conclude our webinar.